Hi, welcome to ThinkTech. We're here live in the studios downtown Pioneer Plaza. I'm your host, Ali Yamashita, filling in today for Jay Fidel for Catching Up with Kakaako. And today we're very pleased to have a special guest, Dean Sakamoto. He's an architect, he's an author, he's an educator, and he has various degrees in architecture. Very notably, he has a master's degree from Yale in environmental design. And today, we're going to talk to Dean about, we were going to talk to Dean about Kakaako and various ideas of architecture, but because of, I know we're all getting back into the swing of things as far as Hurricane Iselle and Julio, the alert, and we're getting back into the flow of regular life. But I thought it was very relevant to talk to Dean with his acumen and expertise in, it's called resilient design. So Dean is going to talk to us about what resilient design means and how that applies to infrastructure and design, especially for the upcoming developments of Kakaako. Hi, Dean. How are you?
Hi, Ali. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're so excited. Okay, so, well, first of all, I want to know, I mean, my goodness, you've been all over the world, in the UK and abroad. You did your studies in the East Coast. You studied architecture and also got your master's degree in environmental design, which I'm really excited to explore with you. But I want to know what, with all your opportunities and all your experience, what brought you back to Hawaii to start your architectural firm in the islands?
Well, good question, Ali. Well, as they say, all roads lead home. And when your home is in a place like Hawaii, I think it's an easy answer, right? And I made a decision about 10 years ago to think about making my way back home. And really what sealed the deal was when I embarked on my research on Vladimir Osipov. I don't know if you're familiar, but I worked on an exhibition and a book called Hawaiian Modern, The Architecture of Vladimir Osipov, which for me was an eye-opener because it was an opportunity to work on a subject or person of great note from my hometown, and who was also who I considered to be the greatest architect in modern Hawaii. And you know, for me personally, that experience was a way to think about what my course was going to be in my career, in my life. And I think it was that experience that, and the people I met who helped me to do this project in the islands, that kind of sealed the deal for me to make my way back to the islands.
Well, we're so glad that you decided to come back. As a matter of fact, I understand that the headquarters for Dean Sakamoto, your firm in architecture, is in the Osipov IBM building in the heart of Kakaako.
Yes, we are. And again, I have people to thank for giving us that opportunity. A good friend of mine, Joe Ferraro, who's one of Hawaii's best architects.
Good friend here.
A good friend. He's been on the show. Invited me to share an office with him in the IBM building on the 5th floor, which happens to be in the epicenter of all that's happening in Kakaako. About a third of what's happening, I think, in Kakaako.
And Howard Hughes headquartered there too, right?
That's right, along with the Howard Hughes Corporation, who I think are looking to elevate design in environmental design in the islands.
So being right there in the hub, in the center of all the upcoming happenings, do you get an ear to the ground of of anything going forward? Like, what's the news? What's happening?
Well, that's what I like to think. But at the very least, we get to say hello. I get to see the players. I say hello and goodbye and aloha. And best of all, I get a view of Ala Moana Beach Park, which is one of my favorite places on earth.
Right. Yeah. So how long have you been headquartered there? for?
Well, just since the new year, we moved into the IBM building, and I still keep an office in New Haven, Connecticut, where our practice began in 1999.
I understand actually that you are, for the IBM building, originally, this is actually another show for Docomomo. You're the founding president of Docomomo, which, if you could explain to the audience what Docomomo is and how they played an integral part in saving the IBM building for Vladimir Osipov, which is amazing in architecture and design.
Well, Docomomo is an approximate acronym for the documentation and conservation of the modern movement. If you consider modern architecture to be a part of a modern art movement, a sort of a modern culture, and a lifestyle that it really came into age during the post-war years in the United States. The modern movement, modern culture, modern intelligentsia began much earlier, but it made its way to the United States after the war, and most notably in the islands here through our architecture and our visual arts and performing arts after the Second World War. You know, this all relates again to Mr. Osipov, who was already a working architect in the islands during that time. And the IBM building was completed in 1962, and fortunately, it's still with us. So now, to answer your question, Docomomo it's an international organization, and Docomomo Hawaii, our chapter here, which formalized about a year ago. We have a intrepid group of about maybe, I think we're like 20 or 30 strong now of members. It's an all-volunteer group, and our mission is to increase public awareness of the value of modern architecture and the modern legacy in the islands. Because if you look out over our city and you look out over our skyline in particular, you'll notice that most of our building stock is of that era. And now there's a 50-year rule in the world of preservation, historic preservation, and you know, when you think back 50 years is, you know, the 1960s, 1964, right? So in 1964, in 2014, this year, the IBM makes its 50th year. It's now a historic building.
Wow, thank you. I mean, actually, that brings me to your role as in the resilient design. I was actually curious, especially with Julio and the storms. Actually, I went through Iniki, so I'm really happy for Hawaii as far as, even though this was an alert and we were lucky this time, that I don't think it's a matter of if, but when the next storm is going to come, right?
Good point. Good point.
So that brings me to my interest in your role in Hurricane. Did I say that right?
Hurricane.
Hurricane, which is an affiliation with the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. You actually developed this course for resilient building design for coastal communities, correct?
That's correct. Hurricane it's a training course. It's a professional training course that was organized and.
Can we hold that thought? I have to lead you right into a commercial, and we'll come right back
break. Okay.
to with Dean Sakamoto, and we're going to talk about more about resilient design and coastal communities.
Aloha, my name is Willow Chang Alion, and I host a show called The Art of Life. We air live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. And what we do is basically we focus on individuals who create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These are movers and shakers, artists, innovators. They are also traditionalists. They're all involved in the archival process, and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community. We're keeping it pono.
Hi, welcome back to Catching Up with Kakaako. Our segment is called A Resilient Kakaako. We're speaking with Dean Sakamoto. He's an architect, he's an author, and he's also, actually he's been a curator and various roles. Right now we're talking about his role as basically, he developed a plan for coastal communities that he has implemented. It's called Resilient Building Design for Coastal Communities. It's certified by FEMA, yes. And I keep on messing up how you say it. Go ahead.
HURA plan.
HURA plan. HURA plan. So this is a term we, as Joe Schmoes, will become familiar with because it seems like it's important, especially living on an island, right?
Yes, an island's prone to hurricanes, that's for sure. So HURA plan was created by the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, which is based at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, led by Professor Carl Kim. And Professor Kim invited me in around 2010, when the center was founded, to develop a training program for hurricane resilience. And it's a training program that's directed towards planning and design professionals, building owners, property managers, and the community in general, people who live in coastal communities that are prone to hurricanes. And what the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, which has an office downtown, by the way, right here in the Oceanet building, a building over, what they do primarily is create these training courses which meet FEMA standards and actually reach out to the community and provide different levels of training for resilience against natural disasters. That's their focus.
What does that mean? What does resilience for?
Okay, so good question. So in the sort of the triad of emergency management and field of resilience, basically you have disaster response, which we typically associate with FEMA.
Right.
We have disaster response when a disaster happens. FEMA or more, more likely the local agencies will be there, state and local agencies, to respond. So
to respond after the fact.
After, and help you prepare
Yeah.
just before. And then you have post-disaster recovery, like for
Right.
example, what's happening in Puna right now on the Big
Yes.
Island after Zell. And then the other leg, the third leg of this triangle, is preparedness. And you know, of course, given the name, the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, the role of this center is to prepare, help society, our society in the United States, prepare for natural disasters. And the brilliance of this program in regard to HURA plan and in regard to NDPTC is that it has found its way to the design community through this program, HURA plan. Because after all, when you think about it, it's your architects, planners, architects, and engineers who really design our communities and plan our communities, and it's been proven, and I think it's just common sense, that the best pre-disaster mitigation is through pre-planning and
Right.
design. So, you know, it sounds like an oxymoron, but you know, all it does for us, I think, as design professionals, is that it gives us now a program and a set of guidelines to design for hurricane preparedness.
So resilient design, does that mean that would be implementing more concrete, thicker glass in Kakaako? Say the structures that they're going to be building, would that be necessary, and wouldn't that be the opposite of sustainable?
Well, you know that's an interesting question. You know, thinking of, if you're speaking of Kakaako in particular, right? You know, we are talking about a coastal community and neighborhood that is vulnerable
Yes.
to coastal hazards such as storms, to tsunami or a geological event, and eventually, as is happening now, sea level rise.
Yes.
And the ramifications of that as well in regard to infrastructure, right? Our sewer and our fresh water supply are at threat. So when you're speaking of a particular area, you know, and I think this is really important, what needs to be done is, first there needs to be an assessment of the hazards, right? The hazards that we're vulnerable to. And I think that's something that I'm sure our regulators, local regulators, the state, city, and and the landowners. You know, I think they're very aware of these issues, and now it's up to the people they work with, the designers, the planners that they hire as consultants, and then ultimately the builders to keep the hazards in mind. And when you speak of, well, what kind of, you know, what are the material ramifications? You know, I can't answer that because it depends on the situation.
Right.
In regard to sustainability, now, you know, I think it's a no-brainer. We're all into sustainability. It's become a part of our culture. And when you think of resilience, you know, resilience really can be defined as a society's ability to rebound from and to resist the forces that are addressed at it from a hazard. For example, high wind, a flood, debris, or any kind of any damage or harm that comes with an event. So how are we prepared for it, and how do we respond and recover? Is resilience. And so now, you know, resilience, I guess you could say it's a buzzword. It's not a new word, but like the term sustainability and the phrase green design, sustainability now is all-encompassing because, you know, I think if we want to, you know, they're almost one and the same. Well, when you speak of sustainable design, we're thinking of really, you know, conserving our resources, conserving energy, and sustaining our life cycle. And when you think about resilience, the ability to rebound and recover, and then to survive, you know, it's all related. It's just, I think, given our what's happening in the world with the climate, even with politics, right?
Yes.
You know, because the hazards are not just natural, right? You know, when you think about 9/11, for example, you know, they're human-induced events as well. You know, I think it was. Maybe, you know, if my memory serves me right, I think it was the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that, you know, led to the formation of the Department of Homeland Security. And then
I remember that.
Right,
Yeah.
and then you know, then Hurricane Katrina was a game changer as well.
Yes.
And then, of course, we had 9/11 in this
yeah.
country.
So when was Hurry Plan established? That was something that you were integral in developing.
Yes, that was my assignment from Dr. Kim.
How did that come to be?
How that came to be with an assignment, but also what came with that was the ability and the resources to work with experts. I didn't do it myself. I was able to bring on board 8 other experts in various areas of hurricane resilient design, from a flood expert to a climatologist, to a coastal geologist, to engineers, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers who have expertise in building systems, a structural engineer who's a national expert in high wind design, who's based right here in Hawaii. His name is Gary Chalk. We're very proud of Gary, and many others. And then, of course, working with the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center was really an ideal environment to have people who are focused on disaster preparedness training.
So is this at your own architectural firm? Is this something that you implement into your building design, or can you consult especially for Kakaako, which I was just reading an article in Hawaii Business on the 60 acres that Howard Hughes is throwing up, and then the 29 acres that Kamehameha, which I think Jay was just mentioning about the Wailea getting geared up into breaking ground already. Besides just code, just the regular code that they have to adhere by, do they need to do more? And are they going to do more, especially being so close to the coast there and the water? Implementing that many structures with that many residents, this is something that we need to think about more for our safety, for our peace of mind.
And the list goes on and on. It's a long list, and those are important issues. And the interesting thing is, getting back to your question on how I got into this. It started really, my interest in this area. Well, as an architect, we're responsible for the safety and welfare, life safety and welfare of the people who inhabit our buildings. So that's something we are trained to know. But now it's become a focus. It's kind of like when accessibility or the Americans with Disabilities Act was put into play in the early 90s. Yeah, we all thought we have to be sympathetic to people with disabilities in our design, but all of a sudden we have metrics and standards. There are a few, like you mentioned, codes and building codes and rules, regulations in regard to some of the hazards like high wind and floodwaters. But if you know something about building codes are important, and we have to, they're the law, but they're prescriptive. They prescribe to specific instances. But what's lacking currently is a uniform set of guidelines, kind of like what the ADA is now for disabilities. And now what for example, building sustainability metrics are, or these rating programs like LEED are for sustainability.
Yes.
And so, the question is, how do we increase the standard? And when you, in many cases, I think the question of whether a project or design meets code, I think that's a given, it has to meet code, but now the big question is, do we have to exceed code? And I'll give you an example, and then how my hands-on experience in this area was, happened about 10 years ago when I was asked to design a hurricane-proof building by a client.
This is on Kauai, right?
On the island of Kauai, and I was just there yesterday at a fantastic organization. I'm going to put a plug in for them here, the National Tropical Botanical Garden, Kalahel, Hawaii, their flagship.
My home.
Your hometown.
My hometown.
Oh my goodness.
I went to Kalahel Elementary.
Oh boy, okay.
I actually saw the photos, and it's a beautiful building.
Well, thank you. Now you have to go visit.
It was originally designed by Vladimir Osipov, right?
The campus, the research campus, was designed by Vladimir Osipov. The design began in the late '60s and was realized by him in the early '80s and throughout the 1980s. And the one building he did not get to actually build, although he started the design, is the Botanical Research Center, which was preempted by Hurricane Iniki, because ironically, as plans were finally being drawn for the research center in tail end of 1992, what happened, right?
Yeah, Hurricane Iniki hit, and they took the roofs off all my neighbors, and we were stuck like Chuck for quite a long time.
Stuck like Chuck, and you're probably 2 years old, right? So anyhow, it wasn't until 2004 where I met Chipper Wickman, who is a fantastic director and CEO of NTBG. And Chipper ensued with the capital campaign to build the Botanical Research Center, which had to be hurricane-proof because it was to house a rare book collection on tropical botany, the Lloyd McCandless Marks books. And so I was asked to do a hurricane-proof building, and then of course I said yes, I could do it. But then I went back to the library, to my office, to the internet, and there was very little guidance on how to do this. So when I say we, as me and my colleagues in my office and my consultants, we did the best we could. We designed a building that exceeds code. It goes beyond building code. And Chipper being the person he is, understood, and I think the board of directors understood that the building had to be designed above code in order to meet the requirement they had imposed for a hurricane-proof building. So it ended up being a concrete and steel building when it could have been a building made out of wood.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Dean Sakamoto. We're talking about resilience in Kakaako and various subjects on resilience building. We'll be back with Dean Sakamoto. Thank you.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Hi, I'm your host, Ali Yamashita. We're talking with Dean Sakamoto. We left off talking about the beautiful Botanical Research Center on Kauai, and Dean and his architectural firm, how they implemented resilient design above and beyond on Kauai, my most favorite beautiful island. And we're back to talk to Dean. Hi.
Well, I think it's great that you're from Kalahel,
Yeah.
Hawaii. As I said, I was just there yesterday for NTBG's 50th anniversary. It was a great event.
Wow.
And now back to the building. The building, as I said, is a concrete building that's built to last at least 100 years. So that's the charge. So I like to think of the buildings we do as one of our own. So I was there yesterday, and it's really gratifying to see that it's there. But really, the proof is in the pudding, and
Right.
we'll see if thankfully, Hurricane Iselle, it really didn't impact Kauai and
Unlike Aniki.
right. And the level of awareness and concern on Kauai is naturally higher than I think in most of our other islands, and that can be concerning here, especially on Oahu with
Right.
the resources and the population we have here.
Originally, when Aniki I believe, was predicted to hit Oahu, and it veered.
It turned.
It
yes.
turned and hit. So we weren't prepared, because we're like, which is actually why I'm very proud of the island, even though maybe now they feel like, back to just back to just normal. But I think it's great that we got our kits together. Everybody was going to the store, preparing way in advance, especially with our technology now that can let us know far in advance what we need to do. So we could gas up our cars and have ice and generators, which during Aniki no one had. Like anybody who had gas or generators or ice were the rock stars of the island. And so now my concern is our building in Kakaako, with me reading this article that they're thinking of building 22 towers, large towers and some low-rise towers as well. But are they taking into consideration the coastal dangers and climate change and the rises in sea level, and as you said, the infrastructure for water, for sewers, for everything? Is this something that is, besides being beautiful buildings or luxury high-rises, are these things that they're implementing? Are they implementing? You're LEED certified as
Yes,
well,
I
right?
am.
So what does LEED mean? Because I know that they're promoting, the Hughes Corporation is promoting it being LEED, but what exactly does that mean for these buildings?
Okay, well as far as I know, Ward Village is a LEED Platinum neighborhood, and LEED NE, I believe, which is a good thing, and it does demonstrate the concern for sustainability on the neighborhood scale. Now, LEED certification for a building is another matter, and I wouldn't say it's out of, I would say that it's very doable. It's up to the owner, and I think certainly the design consultants that they've engaged in are fully capable of pulling it through. And speaking of the plan to do 22 new buildings in Ward Village, it's possible, but I think we have to take the long view as well. The plans are, maybe it's a 10 or 12-year master plan. I'm not sure, but I, the thing I would be concerned about is, I would ask, what is a 50-year vision? How will this neighborhood, what is the vision for it in 50 years? Will the use be the same? Given the effects that's we're anticipating with sea level rise and potential climate changes, and even social shifts, how society changes, how will this big investment perform in the coming years, and how do we anticipate that? I think when it comes down to it, when we do urban developments of that scale, for me personally, I have 4 areas of concern, and I'll read off the list here. The first is economic viability, and I think the developers, they know what they're doing. They're doing what they foresee as the market bearing, and making a profit. And the second is sustainability and resilience, designing and planning for sustainability and resilience. And I think that, is always, I think these are the two areas of design, which actually, is sort of a sum of the parts. And the third is livability. And I think we will all agree that anything that can be done in Kakaako today, 21st century design, should increase livability in our neighborhoods. And when I say livability, I also mean, less car use, right? And
Right.
which I'm a big proponent of. If you know me, you know my family just has one car. It's a small car, and I bum rides off of people, right? I do
Or
that.
that's the way you should
Or I
in
walk.
Hawaii.
And I think that's the future of Kakaako.
On
because
Kauai.
Right. It's the thumb. But the beauty of the urban village that's being planned for Kakaako is that it'll be a walkable neighborhood.
Right.
I think that's a plus. So livability is kind of a given. And then lastly, we have image. Right? What is the architectural image or the design? And this
What do
is,
you mean by that?
what I mean by that is like it or not, these big buildings that come up, we have to look at them, and we have to experience them and live in them. And I think this is the added value of what we do as designers, architects, and engineers. We can provide utility, and we can provide beauty. Right?
On that note, on image, I'm curious if you're familiar, because a lot of glass is going up in Kakaako, which concerns me and brings me to the resilience again. But also, I'm a big proponent, fan of onyx, self-generating. It's got the embedded solar within the glass. And I was wondering if you're familiar with that as far as being sustainable and making buildings work for themselves, generating their own energy. Do you know? Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that product, but I think I know what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And what that leads to is the need for creating buildings that are self-sustaining, right? Buildings that can operate and survive, right, on their own power. And the term for that is a net zero building, basically a building that basically cancels out the fossil fuels that it may generate or that was used to generate its parts. And basically it's a self-performing facility. In some ways, what we did in Kalaheo with NTVG, aspired to that with its sustainability rating. But we're still working towards that. We're looking to make it to increase this photovoltaic array and to improve upon things like that and energy usage. But getting back to net zero buildings, we're talking about there's a program now called the Living Building Challenge, and if we can get buildings to do that, I think we'll be moving in the right direction in terms of climate change and to mitigate that issue, because I think as most people know, in this country alone, buildings in the building industry utilize over 50%, almost 50% of our energy in the country. And the other big users of energy are transportation and industry. And if you look at those numbers globally, the percentage of buildings in the building industry, their energy usage is greater in other countries where you have less industry and less transportation than we do. And so if we can cut back on energy used by buildings in their construction and their day-to-day operation, we'll be going in the right direction in regard to reducing the carbon emissions. That's really the root of the problem, right, causing global climate change.
Right. For Kakaako, do you think, considering, I believe you sent me a link on the 1974, what was it called again? UDOT?
It's the acronym is RUDAT, and it stands for the Regional Urban Design Assessment Team.
Okay. Is that okay? Well, tell the audience what that means.
Okay. What the program is called, the Regional Urban Design Assessment Team, is a program that is organized by the American Institute of Architects
Which you're a part of.
headquarters, which I'm a member of, and many architects are. But this program is based out of the national office in Washington, D.C. By the Community Design Assistance program. And the RUDAT has been around for, well, 50 years now, just over 50 years. And I think they have conducted over 150 what we call RUDATs, which is the acronym. And what a RUDAT is, it's an assemblage of national experts, the top people in areas of urban design, landscape architecture, and planning, who come in to assist neighborhoods and communities, and they provide a third-party opinion and a third-party vision after a fact-finding and information gathering at a locality, and understanding the local problem. So it's an objective, expert third-party opinion. And now, how it relates to Kakaako now, I mean, and it's arguable, if you go back in history, but the 1974 RUDAT for Honolulu was centered on the vision for Kakaako. Okay, and this is prior to the formation of the Hawaii Community Development Authority. Right. And the city still had jurisdiction over Kakaako. And the big question back in the early 70s was what to do with Kakaako. I think now we know what's happening. So it's interesting if you go back to the document, which
we'll bring next time.
Which we may bring up next time. We can bring some of the images online. It's a startling document because it goes back and when you see the 7 or 8 recommendations by the assessment team, one of the main recommendations was that the state create an independent corporation to oversee Kakaako, which ended up being the HCDA.
The HCDA we are all very familiar with.
Yes.
Yeah. I read in the documents which are very interesting and provocative and very telling, especially that it was created in the 70s. It also said that there should be a citizen involvement in back then, and is that something that I definitely feel that it should be implemented currently, especially with the current real development of Kakaako. It's all happening. So, what are your thoughts there?
Yes, well, the plans, for the most part, have been laid, and speaking of citizen participation, I think that that happens, and of course, that's always a question. Are people being heard? But when you look at the big picture here, you basically have 3 major landowners and a state regulating agency. And then between the major landowners, you have, a number of smaller private landowners. And the question always is, who represents the grassroots? And I'm sure the agency, deals with that issue. And they have public meetings, and they have a community meeting room, which I think is a very good facility for that. And I think they try their best. They do what they can. I think in regard to some of the bigger issues we're discussing, the question is, what is the big vision, and who is responsible for it? Right now we have 2 plans. Kamehameha Schools has their plan for their land, and the Howard Hughes Corporation has their master plan, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is creating their plan to round out the 3. Now the question is there one plan? And how does if there's one vision? And I think there are huge opportunities here because you have some very interesting things going on being planned by the landowners. But in terms of the issues we're discussing, sustainability, resilience, livability, economic viability, I think if we can catalyze the efforts of the major landowners and include the voices and the interests of the other landowners, then I think we may be able to come to one vision. I'm optimistic, given the players that we can do it, and that is going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of communication, and open communication to maybe achieve that goal.
Can we hire you as the consultant and the leader to head this?
Well, I'm really just a bystander at this point, but you know, I'm around,
Yes.
and I'd be
You're,
happy
you're
to.
in the belly. You're right
I'm in the
heart.
well, you know, I'm in an old building, the
Yeah.
IBM building, and I'm happy to be here. I think it's really an interesting time to be in Honolulu, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that that the landowners are bringing to our city, what the state is doing for Kakaako.
Well, thank you so much, Dean. Mr. Sakamoto, we are so grateful for you to be here, and we look forward to have you to open the discussion to more about Asapaf and Kauai and the future of Kakaako.
Well, thank you, Al.
Thank you, Dean.